And another thing you quote in the book is that, if I understand it correctly, this comes from the Northwest Ordinance. Congress said, quote, religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall be forever encouraged, end quote. Are you saying that the Founding Fathers, in setting up the original school system in the United States, were saying, we need these schools to teach religion to kids?
Yeah, religion and morality. And in fact, this is ratified even later. Horace Mann, the founder of the modern public school in the 19th century, the major reason for the founding of the modern public school, listen carefully everybody, was to have a common code of morality. Mm-hmm. That with all these diverse religions and sects, we needed to get kids together in a public school so we could talk about the common inherited morality of the United States. That inherited morality, of course, was the product primarily of the Judeo-Christian tradition.
And Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, the great apostles of separation of church and state, were jumping up and down saying, wait a minute, you can't do this, this is un-American.
Well, as you know, it's really more a matter of sect and state, and no one particular sect will be favored over another. But they weren't neutral about religion, and they sure weren't neutral about religion and morality.
So you mentioned, Bill, how you write in your book that this founding principle, this idea that we have natural rights that come from God and the duty of the state is to protect them, and the power of the state comes from the consent of the people, has been echoed throughout our history by great statesmen, great Americans who have righted tremendous wrongs. But isn't it also true that American history hasn't been unbroken progress, that there have been times and places where people, including prominent leaders, have turned their backs, sometimes even expressly, on the founding principles? For example, John C. Calhoun.
Yeah, Calhoun is a fascinating figure, powerful figure, brilliant figure. I tell a story in my book of, where's the memorial to Calhoun? They were looking for the memorial for Calhoun in South Carolina, and a soldier, a veteran of the Civil War, says, I'll show you his memorial. It's 600,000 dead. It's, the vast wastes in Georgia and so on from this war. Look, this happens in American history. And if we tell the truth about American history, we will see that we have done terrible things. We have turned our back on our principles from time to time. We have done things that we're not proud of at all. But the amazing thing about America is that when we do, we talk about it. We almost always correct it, the American capacity for self-renewal. And when we do these terrible things, our citizens find out about them. As Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, they read it in the newspaper, they see it on television, and then we continue to try to improve. We remain now, as we were when Lincoln said it in the 1860s, the last best hope of Earth.
And so sometimes these debates take decades to work themselves out, and incremental progress and setbacks and then steps forward.
But it's clear. But it's so much a story of progress. It's so clearly a story of progress, and that's the remarkable thing. And it is. I mean, these documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, are the most imitated political documents in the world. Mm-hmm. The UN Declaration of Human Rights, which is now supposedly the standard for the world, is based on our documents. Mm-hmm. It's a remarkable tribute.
But there's another phenomenon I noticed in your book where, going along the same line, you have Thomas Jefferson writes the Declaration of Independence, clearly believes in the principle it enshrines, and understands that the slavery system that is then predominant in the American South is wrong and a violation of that. A few decades later, you get Calhoun, who looks at it and sees a contradiction and throws out the principle.
That's right.
He actually decided we cannot have the Declaration of Independence enshrined as a founding principle of our country because it violates our Southern culture of slaveholding.
You're exactly right. It's very interesting. He didn't fudge it the way, a lot of politicians might then and now and say, oh, well, it all depends on interpretation. He had the intellectual integrity to recognize that there's no way to do what he's recommending doing without denying the founding principle. And in doing that, he denies the founding principle. And it's that which, of course, Lincoln feels he has to protect.
Right, and when you had this, you had people like Calhoun saying, okay, we don't believe in the Declaration of Independence anymore. And you had an attempt to bring these principles to bear, to witness the United States Congress by, for example, John Quincy Adams.
Right.
You had an effort of people to shut him up.
That's right. And thus Lincoln's words at Gettysburg, and when we talk about the dedication to a principle, Lincoln is reminding us that no matter how brilliant Calhoun is, he can't be right. that this is the principle which is at the heart of the founding.
So Lincoln was very consciously not just trying to preserve the Union enshrined in the Constitution, but preserve that founding principle enshrined in the Declaration that preceded even the Constitution.
He was exactly right, reminding us of the real foundations of the Republic. It is based, as Lincoln says, on a political and moral truth. And what he feared was going on with Calhoun, it's a wonderful Lincoln phrase, was that the moral lights were being blown out around us.
Throughout the history of our country, it seems like one of the main struggles is the struggle for civil rights, and in particularly involving African Americans. They were the people that were enslaved. You write about Frederick Douglass in your book. What did Frederick Douglass think about the founding documents and principles? Where did they factor in his understanding?
Well, he was a fundamentalist in this sense. And by the way, a not sufficiently appreciated figure in American history. When you look at the heroes of American history, or if you look at a subset, African American heroes, this guy doesn't get nearly the attention he deserves. First of all, he's a tremendous character. Just you'd think young men would look to this guy. I mean, this is a guy who wrestles the overseer at the plantation, and they said it was a 2-hour wrestling match, and then escapes for freedom. He gets on a train, and he buys a first-class ticket, and the conductor says you have to leave. He wrestles with the two heavies on the train who are trying to throw him off. They get him off the train on the platform, but when he's on the platform, he's still holding the first-class seat. This is a tough guy, and his faith in the Constitution, his faith in the Declaration, remains whole. He gives very tough speeches, very strong speeches, denouncing the state of things and the fact that people don't have their equality. Nevertheless, his faith in the country remains whole. He resists a bid to run for president of the United States for black Americans to support Grant, because he believes Grant is one of the great champions of individual freedom and liberty.
And another thing I was struck by your portrait of Frederick Douglass in the book is his prudence. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who looked at how to best advance the cause and avoided rash actions and sometimes rash people.
And the fascinating debate, I thought of this not too long ago when we were watching the debates with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama about who first, a black or a woman. This debate went on with Frederick Douglass and the women who were who were working hard for the vote. And they said, why don't you include women in the leading part of your cause? He said, women have rights. Women, of course, will have rights. But they are not lynching women. They are lynching my brothers. And so we have a priority. He was very strong, very forceful.
And despite his personal experience with slavery, he actually maintained that greater love for what America was all about in the founding documents than some abolitionists.
Oh, he absolutely did, and parted company with a number of the abolitionists, very much like Martin Luther King did, I think, with some of the fire breathers of fire eaters of his time. He said, no, violence isn't the way to go. Nonviolence is the way to go. We will respond to those who yell at us, who beat us, who throw sticks at us, with nonviolence and love and respect for law.
Back, and I think we'll talk about Martin Luther King in a moment, but back as America was still heading towards the Civil War and going through this great debate over whether or not we were going to continue to adhere to principles of the Declaration, we had an astounding decision from the United States Supreme Court, written by a Roman Catholic justice, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
Roger Taney of Maryland. Explain that decision. What did that say?
Well, the Dred Scott decision was a consequential. Let me just say something about this, because in context with Frederick Douglass. When I finished my book, when I said there are a lot of implications of understanding American history accurately. One of them is we should remove the statue of Roger Taney, which stands in front of the State House. Sorry to hit this, but it's important, in Maryland and Annapolis, and replace it with a statue of Frederick Douglass.
It's a good idea.
Maryland. A better guy and a better symbol. You can put Taney somewhere else, but this Dred Scott decision essentially affirming that a slave, a black person, was property, did not have the rights that other human beings have, was an incredible backward step for America at that time.
Between the time of 1776, men like Adams, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson working on the Declaration of Independence to the Dred Scott decision, we went from having a consensus virtually of all the people who were principals in founding the country around this principle that all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator of this right, to a plurality on the Supreme Court, or a group of justices on the Supreme Court simply saying, we no longer adhere to that principle.
Yeah, no, again, this happens in American history. We take 2 steps forward, we go 3 steps back. one wonders where people in 50 years or 100 years will think we are right now, particularly in some of our Supreme Court decisions.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's an interesting point that having a Supreme Court that usurps power is not a new thing in American history.
Well, the fact that we wanted the court to have power is established early on. I mean, in the first decisions of the court, John Marshall and others. But many of us who look at American history and have studied it believe the court has moved beyond what the founders intended. And this, as you and I have talked any number of times, creates a real problem and challenge right now.
Yeah.